All right. So, hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hayla Alawi, and I am so pleased to introduce you to today's author event. We'll be highlighting new fiction from Atmosphere Press, including today three novelists: Annie Seyler, reading from The Wisdom of Winter, which was a literary fiction novel released December 13th, 2022. James Gilbert, who will be reading from Murder at Amapas Beach, the third mystery novel in the Amanda Pennyworth series, released January 20th, 2023, and Ekta R. Garg, reading from In the Heart of the Linden Wood, a magical realism and fairy tale-like novel released February 7th, 2023. All three authors' books can be purchased from online retailers as well as from select bookstores. And of course, you can purchase the books or order them on Atmosphere Press's website at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links in the chat. At the end of today's event, we will have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you think of any questions for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type it in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. During the actual reading itself, please stay muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. Of course, you can certainly feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we're always open to reading them, so feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Annie, Jim, and Ekta this afternoon. Let's start off with our first reader, who will be Annie Seyler. Annie grew up in Connecticut and in rural upstate New York, going back and forth between privilege and poverty within her own nuclear family. Having a foot in two worlds became a theme in her life that infused texture, complexity, and broadened understanding, but also a sense of not quite belonging anywhere. While at prep school and later Cornell, she read Nietzsche on manicured campus greens, soaked up theories in grand lecture halls, and crammed for exams in ivy-covered libraries while spending summers dumpster diving, working hayfields from dawn to dusk, and sleeping on a cement floor with her belongings in a cardboard box. She spent the decades after college in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and Vermont, assisting small businesses and environmental and human health initiatives, falling in and out of love, and earnestly shaking off old limiting ideas about what is and isn't possible. She wrote her debut novel, The Wisdom of Winter, while sitting on the floor of her dining room in the wee hours before dawn, with the shades open to the night sky and her dog asleep at her feet. The story was inspired by real-life moments, a few remarkable people, and a newfound sense that she wasn't who she thought she was, that at 57, she was only just beginning to understand what this whole life thing might be about. The Wisdom of Winter follows Beatrice between Vermont and San Francisco. Incongruities in her life abound. In beautiful, spare prose, The Wisdom of Winter explores the tenacity of misbeliefs, the magic in forgiveness, and the artistry of the natural world in healing the past. And with that, the virtual podium is yours, Annie.
Thank you, Hayla. Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Seyler. Thank you for being here. This is my book. In the passage I'm going to read, we join our heroine, Beatrice, at the age of 27. She's been estranged from her family for several years and has cut all ties to her Vermont upbringing. She now lives in a busy downtown neighborhood in San Francisco. She writes ad copy for products she doesn't believe in and dates her boss, who doesn't really know her. In this scene, an unlikely sighting prompts Beatrice to make a decision that will ultimately lead her to everything she's trying to avoid, everything she doesn't want to confront about herself. So let's dive in. It always starts like this, with the product on my desk before me, asking me to understand it, to speak for it. I pick up the spray butter and examine the canary yellow bottle. The label depicts a cartoon cow and a chicken standing side by side in front of a barn and staring blankly. A takeoff on Grant Wood's American Gothic painting, but surprisingly the chicken holds the pitchfork. I contemplate the butter spray from all angles and spritz it onto my index finger. It doesn't smell buttery, and the color is slightly orange. Nicholas rolls into my office. I lick my finger. Got a minute? He asks, his face radiant and expectant. I nod and he closes the door, but instead of sitting in my guest chair, he hovers by my plastic ficus tree and fiddles with one of its stiff, textured leaves. Are you excited? He asks. About? He throws open his hands as if to receive a huge beach ball. Farm fresh. Yes, butter. Of course I'm excited. I was having a little trouble finding the heartbeat, the sweet spot in a dairy product that contains no dairy. He starts to speak, but I quickly raise my hand to stop him. But now that I've tasted it and experienced its buttery essence, I know I will. Every product, no matter what it's made of or what it does to our bodies, deserves a compelling slogan. I smile with teeth to squelch any doubts about my enthusiasm and to distract myself from more closely examining what I just said. Next door, Marlene's chair is empty, and although Nicholas's back is to the account executive's office across the hall, he maintains a neutral expression when he asks, "Dinner at your place? Pad Thai? We should celebrate your landing the Farm Fresh account," he adds, and allows himself the smallest of smiles. I don't know if I landed it so much as you gave it to me, I say. It's a conversation we have had before. B, you are the best damn creative in this office, and everyone seems to know it but you. Thank you. It's just, I would die if our personal relationship, oh God, kill me right now. Please, just kill me. It's my neck on the line. I'm the one who reports to Carlos. I'm the one who'd have to stand in front of him and explain why a client isn't happy. Well, not stand in front of him. He doesn't do that. I'd have to call him or video chat him or, I get it. I won't bring it up again. Thank you for Farm Fresh. I'm going to nail it. I know you will. What about dinner? Tempted to once again retreat into his company and into his body, I force myself to silently admit he stayed over the last 6 nights in a row, and I don't sleep soundly when he's there. I can't tonight. I've got to do laundry, go food shopping. My dog probably thinks Scotty is his owner. I should really call my brother. I need a good night's sleep. He mimics being pummeled with bullets, each statement ripping a new hole in his chest. It's silly and such a contrast to the guy who led the morning meeting. I giggle, which seems to be what he was hoping for. Boring, he says. I search his eyes for evidence that he's hurt. I find none. Do your magic, he says, pointing to the butter. Then he winks and leaves. Addressing the butter as a girl might her favorite doll, I hold the bottle in my palm and affectionately say, butter, the utter butter. Butter, big on taste, not on your butt, Butter, because some of the best things to eat don't come from a cow. Butter, because real butter is just too damn delicious. Crap, I say aloud. By the time I leave at 5, I have amassed nearly 20 awful slogans, but I know I'm onto something. Often my best ideas come when I'm walking my dog Lobo or ascending to consciousness after a vivid dream. It's as if the answer has to be slipped to me when my analytical mind is off duty. I'm almost at Union Square when I get a text. It's Scotty, my upstairs neighbor. Just let Lobo out to pee. You want me to walk him? No, thanks. I will. Be home soon. By the way, you have no food in your refrigerator. No worries. Bringing home spray butter. Is nothing sacred? Pays the rent. Devil emoji. I'm about to send Scotty an angel emoji when my phone dings again. It's Oliver, my brother. What I told Nicholas was a lie. I had no plans to talk to Oliver. Last time he called, a year ago or so, it was to tell me about the woman he'd started dating and to encourage me to call our father. B, can we talk tonight? Mid-sidewalk, I stop, too flustered to care about the grumblings of the people who walk behind me. I start to type. Sorry, Ollie, can't tonight. I have to. Have to what? I stare at my phone and shake it, remembering the magic 8-ball I once found in the guest cottage at my grandparents' house. It resembled an oversized 8-ball from a pool table, but if I shook the ball, then asked a question, the ball would give me guidance. Outlook good, or don't count on it. I must have overdone it with the shaking and asking, because by the time we left, the only answer the magic 8-ball gave me was, reply hazy, try again. What would it tell me now? I delete what I'd written, and phone in hand, I allow the river of multinational tourists to sweep me up. We flow across Union Square, a 1-block plaza hosting department stores, salons, and the towering Westin St. Francis Hotel. Cars, taxis, and cyclists whiz by as I leave the square at the north end by Powell Street. Unfazed by incessant honking, a whirring of electric buses, and a jangle of trolleys, I concoct rationalizations for rejecting my brother's outreach. I'm sure I'm only thinking them, but when a goth teen eyes me curiously, I realize I've been muttering aloud. The surge of tourists ebb as I walk up Sutter Street, past galleries and restaurants, and then vanish when I reach the high-end apartments near Van Ness Avenue. Surprised by a sense of urgency, my fingers clutch my phone in a death grip. While cresting the steep Sacramento Street hill, it hits me. I'm an adult, living in an exciting, thriving city. 3,000 miles separate me from Vermont, my father and my brother, but with one text, a pinprick, my world deflates. I lose altitude. I whoosh. A speeding vehicle misses me by inches. I leap for my life onto the sidewalk outside my building. Then a whoop from a police siren spins me around. And there, in front of me, directly across the street, is a horse. Tall and gray with a glossy black mane and tail, the motionless thoroughbred looms over the southeast corner of Sacramento and Gough Streets in the small, sloping Lafayette Park. The animal is impeccably groomed with pink fetlock wraps and a matching saddle pad that detracts little from its dignified comportment. Its rider, an armed, uniformed Hispanic police officer, sits stock still with her forearms resting on her thighs, her reins slack, but not sloppy. The only horses I've ever seen in downtown San Francisco were in the background at rallies at the Civic Center or marches in the Castro. I've never seen horses on our residential neighborhood, nor a solo horse anywhere within city limits. But that's not what has my attention. What's more alarming than the presence of this grand animal practically outside my bedroom window is that the horse is staring at me. Not the police officer, just the horse. Vividly, I'm flooded with memories. Topaz's earthy smell and rolling gait, his sweat soaking through my jeans, the sensation of well-being. Riding Pete up Dunder Ridge, bolting through that fallen tree, shredding my t-shirt and Michael John loaning me his. It was the same day, Mom. I wrench my mind away and pull my keys from my backpack. My fingers clamp the building's front door handle and my key slides into the lock, but instead of forging into the building, into my usual routine, I find myself twisting around for one more eyeful. The horse continues to stare at me. A breeze lifts its mane and tail. The backside of my neck tingles. I let go of the key and dig out my phone. I glance over at the horse. Then I send the message I was incapable of sending an hour ago. Hi, Oliver. Just getting home now. Call anytime. Lobo has eaten but hasn't yet walked, and my dirty clothes have been consolidated in a laundry basket, but not yet stuffed into my washing machine when my phone rings. Hey, Oliver says. Hi, Oliver, I answer. How are you? Good, I'm good. Things are really good. How are you? I can't even remember what he knows about my life. It's been so long, so superficial. I'm well, he chuckles. I guess I'll just come out and say it. Rachel is pregnant and we're getting married. I instantly need a chair, but the stool in front of me seems too far away, so I tip against the wall and slide to the floor. Say something positive, I think. Oliver, that's incredible. Amazing. Congratulations. Yeah, thanks, he says. We've been together for 2 years. 2 years? That long? I haven't spoken to my brother in 2 years. Crazy, right? I'm sure I told you. We met at the restaurant. Yeah, we've been together for 2 years. And you're ready for marriage? I am. I mean, I'm only 21, but it's right. All of it. The baby, Rachel, and Dad loves her. She went to the University of Vermont, so they know a few of the same faculty members, and they share that pride. You know how the UVM campus is. Those darn catamounts, I say. The words sound fake even as I'm saying them. Maybe it's just me who's been superficial. I think Dad's grateful for the company and for the chance to have some new projects. You know, he's renovating the walk-in closet by my bedroom so we can use it as a nursery. At our house? You mean his house? Well, yeah, Rachel and I live there with him. We've been there 6 months. I thought you knew. My stomach rolls. My head thunders. Lobo leaves the comfort of his bed and comes to me as if sensing my shift. I caress his head and scratch him beneath his chin. Breathe, I tell myself. I don't know, so you're all there together? I haven't spoken to my father since I moved to California, since the day he called and asked if I wanted anything from Mom's studio before he cleared it out. It was the last straw for me. He continues to send me a card every birthday and every Valentine's Day, and he puts a $50 bill in every Christmas card, but I send nothing. I do nothing. Yeah, it works. It works well, in fact. It's not like the old days with that ominous chart in the fridge. He chuckles again. I can't believe he can even mention the chore chart and laugh in the same breath. Warning creeps across my skin. Lobo tucks closer. I don't want to keep you, he says. I know you're busy, Well, it would be great if you came to the wedding. It's going to be a small ceremony in the backyard, nothing fancy. A minister, a few of our friends, and one or two of Dad's. I know you aren't really speaking to him, but it would mean a lot to me. It would mean a lot to me, Beatrice, if you were here. No, absolutely not, I think. He lets out a long breath. Plus, we're grappling with some urgency because I'd really like for us to be married before the baby is born. A light breeze pushes a tumbleweed of dog hair past my feet. Nicholas likes to say that there's enough dog hair on the floor for me to make a whole new puppy. When's the due date? I ask. 3 weeks. And like an MC, I should draw in the walls of my apartment tilted angles. The ceiling dips, the floor stretches. Where there was order, there was now mayhem. Where there was control, there is now a free fall. I managed to push words out despite my breathlessness. When is the wedding? 2 weeks, the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, he says. I rest my head on the wall as my litany of excuses and rationalizations march into my skull, each one more self-righteous than the last. None emerge from my lips. Instead, my mind goes to the horse across the street in Lafayette Park, his glistening coat, the flutter of his mane, his unlikely presence, his ease, his grace. What follows is a whisper, no, smaller, a flicker, but it's enough. I hear myself speaking before the words are fully formed in my mind. I can't imagine how this is going to work, being in that house with Dad, being in Vermont after so many years. But you're my brother, and I want to meet the woman who has become so important to you. So I guess I'll just have to show up and see what happens with Dad. He draws in a breath. Thank you, Beatrice. I can't wait for you to meet her. I can't wait to see you. It's been way too long. It has, I say, anxious to sever the connection to my family and to the past. I love you, he says. Me too, I say. Phone in hand, I scratch Lobo's hind leg, which sends his tail thwapping appreciatively against the laminate wood floor. The vaulted ceiling draws my eye with its superhighway of hairline cracks, and I realize I have no roadmap, nothing to delineate a clear way forward. Like that frozen magic 8-ball, reply hazy, try again. I text Nicholas, come over, bring Ty, bring Pinot.
Thank you so much, Annie. I think I've said this before, but I could truly just listen to you read your own book all day. It just
Thank
brings
you.
such a life to it. And I mean, believe me, audience, everyone here, the book, you don't need to hear Annie narrate it to have all that life. I mean, just the printed words in front of you is more than enough. It's the storytelling. Oh, okay. I gotta stop gushing before I go on all day. But thank you again, Annie.
Thank you.
All right, reading next is James Gilbert. Jim is the author of 4 novels and 11 books on 20th century American history. Born in Chicago, he attended Carleton College in Minnesota and the University of Wisconsin. For a number of years, he was professor of history at the University of Maryland. And during this time, he traveled and lived abroad in Europe, Australia, and Latin America. Murder at Amapas Beach is the 3rd novel in the Amanda Pennyworth mystery series, and it's based on his frequent visits to Mexico. He currently lives in Silver Spring, Maryland. In Murder at Amapas Beach, trouble always seems to find Amanda Pennyworth, the American consul to the resort city of Puerto Vallarta. First on a romantic outing to a secluded cove along the Mexican coast, where the beautiful Danielle Maglin is found bludgeoned to death, and then at an elegant dinner party thousands of miles away only days later, with the killer surely present, Amanda finds herself drawn into the search to find the culprit's identity. We'll have to hear more now from Jim himself.
Thank you very much. I won't have to give you any context because that was fine. I'm going to read from the beginning of the beginning of the novel. After Amanda and her Mexican boyfriend, who was a police officer named Romero Morales, have returned back to Puerto Vallarta after the brutal murder of Danielle Maglin. Amanda awoke the next morning at the moment light began to creep into her bedroom. Seeing the border of gray pallor around the curtains, she knew that it was still very early. She pulled the sheet crumpled around her feet up over her chest and lay still, trying to make sense of everything that had happened the day before. What began as a brilliant outing, a perfect day of swimming and companionship, had ended in chaos that descended in a swarm of startling shocks. A murder, the intrusion of police, panicked tourists, and then a hasty goodbye to Romero. Romero most of all. Why was it, she wondered, that events seemed to conspire to separate her from her handsome sergeant? First was his transfer to Oaxaca. She wondered if that had been intentional, or if someone, Gonzalez, who's the chief of police of Puerto Vallarta, Gonzalez, who disliked her, or Romero wanted to separate them. And now the disruption of their final moments together just a few hours ago, and that clumsy goodbye. She tried to remember the expression on his face when he left. Was he sad about leaving her? Happy that he had spent a week's vacation in Puerto Vallarta? Relieved to be going back to work? Of course, she couldn't remember and couldn't possibly know anyway. The only thing for certain was her confusion and disappointment. She had always been uncertain about herself and the fitful relationships she had managed to establish and maintain, or rather, to maintain for a while and then lose. In part, it was her own fault. She had signed up with the Foreign Service knowing full well that relationships were difficult, if not impossible, given the frequent reassignment to a new post. There were moments when she thought she had intentionally chosen a peripatetic life, a life of serial relocations, to excuse herself from anything like a long-term connection so she could hide her lack of self-confidence. The perils of commitment were a frequent discussion when she met other members of the Foreign Service, and the gossip was almost always about who had hooked up with whom. And inevitably, someone repeated the stale joke that diplomats had invented speed dating at Foggy Bottom, at the headquarters of the State Department. But if she faced up to her prospects honestly, what future could there be with Romero? Her job would soon take her to someplace new and undoubtedly distant, Asia perhaps, or the Middle East, and a dangerous posting in some green zone that was necessary for advancement in the service. But if she gave up her job and stayed with him, married him, what life would they have together? What could she do in Mexico as someone's esposa in Oaxaca? And she couldn't imagine he would abandon his police career and trail behind her from one distant posting after another. What could he do as her esposo? She sat up suddenly, distressed by her meandering thoughts and disgusted with herself for allowing moments of quiet to warp into such feelings of self-pity. She had work to do today, and not just at the consulate, where there are always problems to be solved and new challenges. It continued to amaze her how often American tourists or someone in the large expat community could concoct some ingenious misfortune or legal complication. But most importantly, there was the murder of Danielle Maglin. She knew she wanted to be part of the investigation and was determined to be so, in fact. She felt strongly obligated to the woman whose life she had saved and whose last words seemed to be the murmur of her name. She was tied by the accidental bonds of circumstance to find the killer. It was a duty she felt she owed. But how to be of help? The police had ordered the tour group to remain in their rooms while they investigated. She didn't even know where they were, somewhere near the marina area, no doubt, where there were scores of large hotels timeshare condos, gates, and guards. It could be any one of them. And with Captain Gonzalez heading the investigation, a man who made no secret of his distrust of her and his general dislike of Americans, what could she do? Call him up and ask? Ask for what? After a quick breakfast, she left the apartment, walked down the steep sidewalk that edged the cobblestone street, and crossed Lazaro Cadenas Square. Although it was still early, several souvenir booths were already setting up their canvas tents along the edge. Amanda had passed by so often that she felt she knew the owners, and they often greeted her with an expectant smile. There was something appealing about their persistent optimism. Their hope for a better day could be contagious. She continued on down to the Malecón, pausing for a moment to watch the ocean waves break against the rocky section of beach, and then turned north, heading toward the consulate. All along the boardwalk, there was the business of preparation and enterprise, claiming its place for the day. An elderly woman with a tray of jewelry hooked on a harness around her neck had set up on the bridge over the inlet. The human statue, made up like a gaucho, was preparing for tourist selfies. The sand artist spritzing his sculpture with water before it dried and collapsed in the sun. And the sweepers with their brooms, collecting the inevitable debris and dust that had accumulated in front of restaurant and store entrances. A few cyclists rode along the edge, dodging the early morning tourists out for a brisk walk. A man dressed in tight leggings and a tank top was leading a yoga class of several women in an area where the boardwalk widened. As she looked at them, she almost ran into a jogger, a young man wearing only tight shorts and gym shoes, his bare chest glistening with sweat. All along the Malecón, every hour was different as the day progressed, but each day's rituals always began like this, she thought. She was at the consulate by 8:45. Her assistant, Nando, short for Fernando, would arrive shortly. He was always prompt and dependable. She paused at the entrance of the reception area to turn on the overhead lights, and then walked over to a row of chairs set against the wall. She straightened two or three of them, and then unlocked her office, entered, and went immediately to the window behind her desk. She shoved it open, letting the morning breeze flutter in for a moment, and then closed it again. She sat down and took out a long, yellow legal pad. She preferred to work out her thoughts by hand. And then with a ballpoint pen, she wrote across the top, Danielle Maglin. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. The way that you build the setting for us so we can really feel the place, because it's so important to the story. It's great. And I love that it continues through the text, which of course everyone here, you got to find out by picking up the
Who
book.
did it?
All right. Well, our final reader for today is Ekta R. Garg, a writing contest judge and frequent writing workshop presenter at her local library. Ekta also hosts Biblio Breakdown on her author website. In this writing podcast, she offers exercises so writers can improve their craft and hear about great books all at the same time. Visit ektargarg.com and click on Biblio Breakdown. She also manages The Right Edge, therightedge.wordpress.com, and its extension blogs of original fiction, book reviews, and parenting adventures. Ekta lives in central Illinois with her husband and family. In the Heart of the Linden Wood is her second book and first full-length novel to be published. This novel, In the Heart of the Linden Wood, asks the question, what comes after happily ever after? For generations, the magic trees have supported the kingdom of Linden. The wood is prized in kingdoms everywhere for its special properties. It's one of the few good things King Christopher inherited from his late father, evil King Vincent. Then word comes that the trees are dying and no one knows why. But we'll become immersed in this world now with Ekta.
Thank you so much, Kayla. It's so great to be here to meet Annie and Jim, to hear your amazing work. And I'm so glad that I get to be a part of this event today. I am going to read from the very beginning of the book and into a little bit of chapter 1. And I'm actually going to start with the dedication, because I think this kind of sets the tone for who I wrote this book for, and a little bit of who I am as a person. So I've dedicated this to all of the grown-ups who still believe magic is real and that fairy tales aren't just for kids. This is for you. And this is the opening of the book. The Keeper's Question. In our heart of hearts, where we let few people enter, at some point we've all wished someone dead. Does it sound harsh to say this? I suppose some might consider it outrageous, because to wish someone dead would mean we've gone past the point of revenge and simply want that person gone so our own pain can end. It also means we've lived through every level of that pain first, hoping things would change, wishing it away. Wishing someone dead means you have nothing left, that your soul is empty and your heart will never be the same. I'm something of an expert on that. All of us have experienced the searing pain of betrayal by someone we once trusted, a friend who knew our deepest secrets, a guardian who vowed to nurture us, a love who promised us the sky above the sun and the dusk between the stars. Betrayal I experienced was the last kind. Vincent, the Prince of Linden, was impatient to take his throne. He believed the power I possessed would help him, so he leaned close and whispered promises in my ear. He told me I meant more to him than everything, including the kingdom. He lied. When I discovered his dishonesty, the cut ran so deep I lost my heart and haven't regained it since. But this story isn't just mine. This story belongs to all of us whom Vincent betrayed, because he did go on to become king, and he ruled Linden with spite and distrust of anyone who questioned him. He married for political gain and had a child so Linden would stay within the family. Then he betrayed his son. He belittled his son, Christopher, telling him he would never have the courage, the strength, the heart to rule Linden with any significance. He set himself on a pedestal so high that when the boy tilted his head back to look up, he fell and landed in a large hole of self-doubt. When Christopher came of age, Vincent died in an accident. He should have had that accident much sooner. Not for my sake, you understand. I no longer had my heart. What did it matter to me what happened? But I did wish that those under his rule would have gained their freedom from his tyranny sooner. Christopher took the throne, and for the beginning of his reign, the people of Linden held their breath. Would the new king also work them beyond the state of exhaustion, demand more in taxes than they could give? Would King Christopher taunt and disparage those under him as his father had done before? He did not. Many Lindeners suspected he had suffered as they had, albeit as the heir to the throne. In quiet dinners together or crossing through the wood, when the people of the kingdom thought they were alone, even though I could hear them, they confessed how much they pitied Christopher. He must have endured worse than they did. The new king didn't have much experience at court, but he knew how his father led. When the senior-most counselor placed the crown on his head, Christopher chose in that moment to lead his people in stark contrast. Where Vincent showed anger, Christopher showed kindness. Where Vincent extracted a person's lifeblood, Christopher requested his people's hard work. In every way, he endeavored to be nothing like his father. This included the woman he married. When Christopher's mother was alive, she didn't voice her opinion about how the evil king ruled kingdom and castle. She wasted away, sick in heart and health, until she died. Christopher treated his wife with the courtesy his father had not extended his mother, and the new queen became more than a figurehead to rule by his side. She became a trusted confidant, a friend. She gave back to Christopher every ounce of self-assurance the evil king had stripped from him. She believed in him without any hesitation. It took time for him to learn to trust, but Christopher returned the love tenfold, 100-fold to his new queen. People rarely saw one without the other. Under Vincent, he cowered like a plant left too long in the sun. With his wife, Christopher unfurled like a nourished tree to stand tall. I watched all of this from afar. It was too late for me to find my heart, but Christopher found the light of his and would do right by Linden and its. This is the power of love. It moves us to do things greater than we can imagine and redeems us. When Christopher needed someone desperately to believe he could rule a kingdom that had grown suspicious of its monarch, a new queen stood by his side to show the people and him that she supported him. The people regained their trust in the king and the queen, and the monarchy's ability to keep them safe and fed. The story seemed destined for a happily ever after. And yet, something has changed. I can sense it in the way the trees have slowed their growth. I am the keeper of the Linden wood, it is true. My power will only last as long as I do. This last fact, the revelation of it, makes me wonder whether I should have gone looking for my heart after all. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, the queen screamed in pain and the king froze in fear. He writhed on the birthing bed as another pain racked her body. Her ladies-in-waiting scurried, some bringing warm towels, some lighting scented candles around the room to soothe the queen's anguish. Geraldine, the healer and lead midwife, wiped the sweat from the queen's forehead and neck with a clean cloth. Breathe, your majesty, she said, just as we practiced. King Christopher of Linden stood rooted to the floor not far from the bed. When he had walked Lily to the birthing chamber that morning, she only whimpered every 10 or so steps. After each whimper, however, she squeezed his hand and smiled. Nothing had prepared him for this sheer force that coursed through his wife as if it would rend her in two. They had been working in the royal study on a trade treaty when a short exclaim dropped from Lily's lips in a rounded "oh." Christopher sent the queen's lady-in-waiting to find Geraldine, and he helped Lily stand. He rested a hand on her swollen belly and her lower lip trembled. "Lily?" Christopher asked, his hands fluttering close but not touching her. She licked her lips, the apprehension in her eyes the only thing telling Christopher how she felt. "I believe the time has come to welcome the heir to your throne, your highness." "Shall I call for a rolling chair?" Christopher asked. He searched her frame from head to foot as if the secret to relieving her discomfort hid in the locks of her hair or in a more comfortable shoe. She shook her head. "I believe," she swallowed hard, "I would like to walk, your majesty, if you will assist me." To Christopher, it seemed as though an age passed between the study and the birthing chamber where Geraldine had already assembled her team of assistants. A soldier darted into the chamber and did a quick circuit of the room to guarantee safety. As he pushed open the door for the king and queen, Lily sighed with relief at the sight of the bed. Geraldine acknowledged Christopher with a deep curtsy, imitated by every woman present. Then the healer went back to her task. Now Christopher stood helplessly by the queen's side. In the 7 years since his coronation, no one had ever ignored his presence in any space until now. He watched as the midwife made brisk trips to different parts of the room. She stopped at a cart with steel instruments gleaming in the light of the large lamps and bobbed her head as though counting. Then she went to another cart holding an astonishing number of clean towels and thumbed through them. When Geraldine focused her attention on a knot of assistants in a third corner, a voice called Christopher's attention back. "Go, your majesty," Lily said, the exhaustion in her voice belying the sparkle in her eyes. "The treaty remains unfinished. Please finish your work." Christopher squeezed her hand with gentleness. "Surely I can do some good here." Her eyes screwed shut and her face contracted as another birthing pain took her in its grip. Lily's grasp made Christopher hiss, echoing the noises Lily made. Her own gasps punctuated her groans. Geraldine appeared at Christopher's shoulder. There, your highness," she murmured, her full of concentration on Lily. "Not much longer now." The healer uncurled Lily's fingers from Christopher's hand. She offered him a sympathetic grin, but her eyes conveyed a clear message. No, he would be of no help here. He turned his attention back to Lily. Sure, she would ask him to stay. She had retreated into an unknown world where exhaling her pain seemed her only goal. Christopher inclined his head to acknowledge Geraldine's help. In Lily's ear, he murmured a wish to be well. Then he left the birthing chamber. A soldier followed at a discreet distance as Christopher returned to the study and made an elaborate show of sitting at his desk. The gentleman in waiting, standing by the door, squared his shoulders, ready to fulfill even the smallest command. The king frowned at the thick sheaf of papers on his desk, the latest draft of a treaty offering more reasonable trading terms to the compact kingdom of Fairhaven than his predecessor had extended. In the years since his crowning, he had begun making reparations on the trade treaties with all of the nearby kingdoms. He also took Lily's advice to reach farther than the borders of their current allies, and they had discussed, argued, written, and rewritten terms until every treaty was perfect. Kingdoms close to us will know of the wood, Lily said, referring to the famed primary export of Linden, but others farther away will have only heard stories. They will want assurances. You cannot offer all of them the same terms you offered Windermere. They exchanged a smile, and Christopher pulled her in for a kiss. Nearly 8 years earlier, after his father's death, but before ascending the throne, he had traveled to Windermere to reopen a dialogue with King Malcolm. He came home with signed treaties and a promise to return to marry the princess. Christopher glanced at the door to his study now. Did he return to the birthing chamber and ask after Lily's welfare? He had urged him back to their work, true, yet he was the king. More than that, he was a husband and soon to be a father. That last thought made him rise and take half a step toward the door of the study. But it seemed as though only women are welcome during the birth. And what would Lily think if she discovered I had whiled away my time here? No, better to continue what we started. With a conflicted heart, he settled himself in the chair and reread the opening paragraphs he and Lily wrote together.
All right, thank you so much, Ekta. I have to say, I am fully the target audience for Linden, and I absolutely endorse it. I have always wondered about these questions about fairy tale endings and the actual characters behind these very iconic stories, and Ekta delivers. So thank you so much. And thank you to all three of you, really. I mean, there's so much to discover in these books. And I mean, I love fiction of all kinds. So I'm always here to explore all these different genres and celebrate them. So that all being said, we do have about 10-15 minutes for our audience Q&A. So if anyone has a question, authors including questions for one another, just go ahead and type it in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. We already do have a couple of questions, so we'll just get started right away. We have a question for Jim. This is from Annie. You've written several books in various genres as well. Do you have a favorite, or does one hold special meaning to you?
Oh my, that's an interesting question. You know, I think I always like what I'm writing currently best because I think that I'm most engaged in it. But I will say that I really do like the Amanda Pennyworth series because I like this main character. I thought for a long time about how to write across genders, about how to have a female character. And one of the things that's really been interesting to me as I wrote these three books was how much I learned about this person. And she became a really alive and interesting individual for me. So I suppose in a way, the Amanda Pennyworth books are my favorites, but the work I'm doing now is awfully interesting to me. So it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I think
Great
something
question.
yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a fantastic question from Annie, but I think something that or writers or people who don't write fiction, that it's not immediately obvious that these characters really become real people. So it totally makes sense to hear that from you, Jim, that Amanda and probably other characters really just came alive for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. We have a question to all three authors. This is from Cheryl. In what ways has your writing changed since you began writing? Maybe we could start with Ekta.
Wow. Well, I definitely think that I have become more of a mature writer. I mean, the things that I'm tackling now are deeper and I think more towards my target audience, which I write for adults, for grown-ups, than say I was like 15 or 16. I think also more than the writing itself, I feel like I've become stronger and more mature in terms of taking constructive criticism. So, even like 10 years ago, I would, if somebody would have offer me feedback on my work, or even now, when reviews are coming in for Linden or for my first book, The Truth About Elves, if it had been a 2-star review 10 years ago, I would have probably spent days and weeks like sitting in a corner questioning everything about my writing life. Now, I mean, of course, I feel bad, like nobody wants to get 2-star reviews, but I do realize that not every book is for everyone. I mean, I review books professionally myself. There are plenty of books that I don't like that so many other people like. When I write reviews and I review other books, I definitely try to maintain a deep amount of respect and awareness for the amount of time that the author has put in. And I always talk about the work. I never direct any comments towards the writer. And so I always try to remember that when people are, commenting on my work, they're commenting on the work. It's not a comment on me as a person. And sometimes some of their feedback is actually really good. It's like, oh yeah, I can think about that, or it's something important for me to remember for the next time. So I feel like I've definitely become more secure in myself as a writer and in my writing, and I'm definitely more intentional now, more aware of what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm also a freelance editor, so I've always got like those two sort of tracks in my brain, one like from the writer's side and one from the editor side, kind of analyzing what I'm doing. So definitely more intentional about my work, rather than just kind of sort of letting it fall and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. That growth, I mean, it never fully stops, I suppose. But yeah, I imagine the curve can be really steep for the beginning. So, um, Annie, do you have any thoughts to share with us as well? In what ways your writing has changed since you began the writing?
Definitely confidence. My confidence has grown, and my understanding of needing to sort of get out of the way to sort of receive the story, or be in that sort of collaboration with wherever the story is coming from, that I have to meet and then receive and then articulate. And in the beginning, I wasn't trusting as the story was taking shape, even though I kind of knew what a chapter was about. I wasn't really trusting where it was taking me. And by the end of this book, I certainly had a sense that I had this wonderful relationship with that part of me that was sort of sending the story. I felt so connected to this place where the story was coming from, that felt like part me and part not me, but we kind of found love with each other. And so that's been really exciting, and I can't wait really to write the next book, because I can't wait to have that feeling again. And that feeling hasn't been as prominent through the promotional process, that feeling of just like being in that tight collaboration with that other writer part of me. And I also agree with Ekta that by the end of right before publishing, I felt I was so psyched to have had a phenomenal developmental editor. And I was really resistant to, I was afraid of how the feedback would feel initially when the manuscript was done. But by the time I went to publish, I had learned so much from the editor that I had at Atmosphere. Her analysis was so swift and clear and intuitive and smart, and she made the book better. Like the gaps she pointed out, she didn't tell me how to fix them. She just let me know they were there. And as hard as it was to hear it, boy, she really helped me to improve the story dramatically, just with one really rigorous 2 rounds of rigorous editorial feedback. So I'm much thicker skinned now, and I'm eager for really intelligent feedback like that. It's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's this kind of almost like a high that you get when you're in the middle of that writing process and chasing that. Oh, I totally understand that feeling. Jim, rounding us out, especially with such a large canon of books, in what ways has your writing changed since you began writing?
Well, I'll tell you, I have a long career as an American historian, and I wrote a lot about 20th century culture, and I loved it. It was wonderful. I loved doing research, and I went all over the country, burrowing into manuscript collections and acquainting myself with the secret writings of lots of people, but I got frustrated. And I was frustrated because of two things. I couldn't enter into the thoughts of the people I wrote about. It was not possible. All I could do was to see what they said or what they did. And that's a way of getting at people, but not as profound as what I was interested in. And secondly, I always wanted to write dialogue, and you can't do that in history. And so I thought, well, hell, I'm going to write some fiction, and I'm going to satisfy myself by incorporating those two things. And I love doing that. It's my favorite part of writing. The mental process of the person who's speaking is really important to me. And as I write more books, I get more comfortable doing that. And the dialogue is something I love to construct, because I'd love to watch people in my own mind interact. And I think that's a wonderful thing, to overhear their conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. You and me, Jim, it's all about the characters and the dialogue. So I'm really vibing with that answer as well. We have a question now. This is for Ekta from Annie. Do you feel that the realm of Linden revealed itself to you, or did you build it?
It was a little bit of both, actually. Fun fact about the Kingdom of Linden is actually based on the state of Illinois. And here's what happened was I was actually driving to a writers conference, and I was on the highway and, going through the state, and I saw the name Linden on a board, like on the highway side. I'm like, that's a really fun name. And I had already started kind of brainstorming this book. And I was like, that's a really cool name for a country or for a kingdom. And I was like, I wonder what other names we have. So I actually bought a map of Illinois and I pulled it out and I started looking. And so all of the place names in this book are real places in Illinois. We have a lot of really cool fairy tale sounding names in our state here. And so when I started thinking, when I got that inspiration from seeing the highway sign, and I started thinking about Linden, it kind of sort of took on some of the properties of the state. And it actually gave me an idea to write future fairy tales based on other places I've lived through, the last 20 years or so. I've lived in 5 different states. So I'm like, it might be fun to go and do that for all the states I've lived in, sort of as my homage to living in different places, and just to kind of see what reveals itself in doing some research about the geography of each place. And so part of it, as far as I know, we don't have any magic trees here in the state. So that was something that I actually built on my own. So it's kind of a collaboration between what was already here and my own imagination and where I knew I wanted the story to go. And so all those things coming together, Linden to life.
Yeah, that approach, that's so unique. And I feel like that must help contribute to such a real feeling world. I think oftentimes with world building, it's so complex, so it can feel sort of like smoke and mirrors, but grounding it like that, oh, I might have to steal that.
Well, and for me in particular, when I write, I find that I like to write about places that I've either visited or that I've lived in. That's not to say that I won't write about places that I haven't been to, but I just somehow I feel more connected to the story and to the character. Might be part of it. That's just part of how my writer's brain works anyway. So I'm always, whenever I'm writing about, something, working on a serious project, I just naturally I'm inclined to do that to begin with. So that might be part of it.
Yeah, definitely grounding the elements like that. So we have one last question that I want to pose to all three of the authors. This is coming from Liz to all three of you. What role does foreshadowing play for you? Does it guide your writing? Do you go back and add it when you've already moved ahead in the story's unfolding? I love this question, especially because coming from three rather different genres that are still all within fiction, I'm just really excited to hear what you all have to say. But let's start off with Annie. What are you thinking about this question?
Thanks for your question, Liz. I'm thinking that there's some broad strokes foreshadowing built into my original planning, my looking at the big picture, but the really meaty part of it, the nuancing, and I think that the depth comes for me in the writing, in the day-to-day writing. I discover it. Parts of it, most of it I discover as I go. Some of it I anticipate in my planning process.
So a bit of a combination there. Jim, what about you, especially writing in mystery genre? Where does the foreshadowing come into your process?
Well, it's everywhere. I have a peculiar way of writing, I suppose. Maybe it's not so peculiar, but I have to know where the story is going to end approximately before I can begin. And then at that point, I turn the characters loose and watch them as they advance toward that ending. I will say that I probably spend more time editing than I do actual writing. I think I'll probably write I don't know, 300 or 400 words, maybe more than that every day. But I edit over and over and over again, and I find that the process of editing is a way of entering into the prose, entering into the characters, entering into the dialogue, entering into everything that you do. And I find that that editing is in some ways my greatest pleasure. I find that's what makes the book work, is going over and over and over again until everything is completely alive to me.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a bobblehead when you're speaking, Jim, because it's all resonating so much with me. But yeah, that totally makes sense, of course. And I think the way that feeds into the process throughout, yeah, definitely. And finally, rounding us out, Ekta, for you, where does that foreshadowing come into the process?
I feel like I'm kind of in the middle of both Annie and Jim, because I definitely am a plotter. I do need to know where the story is going to end. I need to know the main plot points. But like Annie, I also leave myself open to the discovery along the way. So some of the foreshadowing is definitely planned out, and some of it just happens in that moment of that magic of writing. And it's so nice when that is there, because it still leaves me open to plenty of discovery and a lot of freshness in terms of what comes out on the page. And for this book in particular, I actually started out, I was working with a writing mentor, and I had originally thought about pitching it to literary agents, which I did. I pitched to about 65 to 70 agents before I decided to come to Atmosphere with it. And so in working with my writing mentor, I wrote a pretty detailed roadmap of the way that the book was going to go, which started out as, gosh, I don't know, 8 or 9 pages, and eventually became condensed down to 1. And so that really helped me get to know the story really well and exactly where it was going to go, but there was still plenty of space. Okay. So there were some main things that I knew that I needed to foreshadow ahead of time to let kind of lead readers along, but then other things that just sort of fully surprised me when I got down to it. Sort of like in the middle.
Yeah, bringing together the best of both worlds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I I am continually amazed by all three of your work and the thoughts that you're bringing to this conversation, and just how much thought is going into your writing in general. And I just want to say again, thank you so much to Annie, Jim, and Ekta, all three of you, for being generous with us today and sharing all of this with us. And thank you to everyone who was here with us today to celebrate these writers, everyone tuning in later to the recording. And don't forget, of course, that you can order The Wisdom of Winter, Murder at Amapas Beach, and In the Heart of the Linden Wood from the links that I've just dropped in the chat. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, to sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. Feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. We look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it for today. So have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.